Welcome to an IEXIST podcast. Our entire mission can be summed up in one phrase: becoming all that we are. It is our belief that fulfillment doesn't come from changing into things you aren't, but rather from becoming everything that you already are. And ultimately, we're here to press and empower you to lead lives that are full of fulfillment. We've dedicated this specific podcast to the dream, not to having the dream or even talking about the dream, but to living the dream. The reality is that there's a stark difference between having a dream and manifesting one. Here you'll gain insight and wisdom keys directly from some of the water walkers of our generation, dream practitioners, those who have decided to tread paths where there were none, to step out into only what they could see. Come take a peek into the minds of some who, from within, create our world's most magnificent realities. I'm the creator and host, Brian Farr, and this is the Living the Dream podcast. All right, welcome to the 10th episode of Living the Dream podcast. Again, I am your host, Brian Farr, and I'm appreciative for you listening today. I've released 9 episodes that have really great content. If this is your first time listening, I would appreciate if you did go back and check out a lot of the content. Whether you know it or not, I really try to produce content that I feel like is going to help you along your journey. The last 2 have been dedicated to a more recent, serious subject matter, but I hope you do still check that out. I feel like there's a lot of good conversation around a lot of the current world events. There's good information there in case you ever want to check it out. And again, I would appreciate it if you did. Also, if you're listening to this on a platform that has ratings and you can leave a comment, also feel free to do that about how it's impacting you and even suggestions or whatever. You can actually just hit me up on social media, do whatever you want to concerning contacting me and just let me know, give me feedback, things like that. So we'll jump straight into it. Again, today I have a guest who's a young entrepreneur, and I'm not using the word young as an insult. I know a lot of times when I was younger and somebody pointed out that you were young, it was almost a shot to your ego in a little bit of a way because they were trying to imply that you may not be the most knowledgeable or things like that. And I don't know if many of you know this, but oftentimes when I started speaking, people would sometimes just group me in as a person that needed to speak to the youth. And I always kind of took that in an insulting way just because I felt like I had material and I knew I had material that even older people could benefit from. So I'm not using young in that type of way. Has come across to me very much as a mature guy. And I'm excited to talk to him today. From his perspective, he contacted me through social media not too long ago, and we were able to exchange information, and I was able to be a guest on his podcast, which I enjoyed, and I'm sure he'll enjoy today. So without trying to introduce him too much, I'll let him do a lot of the talking about himself. Let's all welcome Ayden Reddington.
Yeah, thank you, Brian, first off, for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate your time and efforts being put into the show, and just a big thank you for coming on my show as well. That was also a lot of fun. And actually, I really appreciate that message with the word young. I also feel like, kind of like you were saying, when you were younger, you had a lot to say. And I also feel like the same way. I feel like I want my message to be heard, and I feel like I can reach pretty much anyone, if you kind of get what I mean there.
Yeah, absolutely. There is a such thing as being, I guess, an old soul or being a precocious child, I guess, is a more formal way to say it. And so I do recognize that in others when it's there. Not everybody that's young is immature and not everybody that's old is mature, And so I think that's a thing that, I don't know, maybe we should be careful about as people as far as like judging in that type of way. But again, you've very much so come across as a person, and I know you are a person that's just not only a genuine soul, but definitely on the mature side. I'm, if you'll allow me to say this, even proud of the efforts that you're making already as an entrepreneur. And again, I'll let you talk about a little bit of that in a second here. But just things like that is just very mature movement for your age. And I can tell by a lot of the people that you've told me have been, or maybe 1 or 2 influences that you have, for you to already have an ear to those voices and know who's speaking quality material, again, is another mark of maturity. Why don't you go ahead and let the people know who you are and what you're into and just a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'll start that off. It's kind of funny. When I was pretty much 8 years old, I went up to my mom and I was like, I can't wait to be an adult. And that's just what I've been telling people for the last 10 years. And finally I turned 18 6 months ago. I've reached that big ultimate goal of becoming an adult. And it's actually been pretty fun just taking on more responsibility. I appreciate the responsibility and I respect it. But to introduce myself, my name is Ayden Reddington. I was born and raised in Minnesota for 14 years. I lived all around, like a little bit out of the cities towards the end of when I was in Minnesota. And about 4 years ago, I moved to Texas with my family. We had some job switches with my dad and stepdad. From then on, I started high school in Texas, which was a big switch, different culture, different area of living. I kind of went from like a city type living to country style living. And through high school, I really got into business and I kind of just created a clothing brand, a lawn care business, and I was able to get my friends involved. I employ some of my friends. And all in all, I just kind of enjoy helping people. From my heart, at the most that I want to do is just help people out, whether it's growing a business, motivating them, or things as serious as convincing people to just level up in their life and know that they're meant to do great things and all things like that. But, other than that, other than kind of the more mature side of things, I really like superhero movies. I really like listening to podcasts. I love snowboarding and surfing. And that's pretty much what I got.
For sure. I wanted to say also, I have a family member who's also like a brother to me, who I kind of grew up with, and life would have it that we, I guess, kind of parted ways a little bit, not off of anything, personal. It was just life. And by the time I reconnected with him, he was on the verge of starting his own lawn company. And so after you reached out to me and I saw that you had your own lawn company, he was a person that I contacted after, just because we have conversations often. But I did bring you up because I thought it was unique that you had a lawn company, and I thought that was just kind of cool. So let me ask you this. What actually got you into those chosen career paths or those chosen entrepreneur pursuits, especially concerning lawn care and the more practical things that you're doing? I'm going to tap into what you were saying about wanting to help people. But as far as the lawn care, as far as doing things like that happen to do with actual service business, what made you decide to get into those?
Yeah, it's actually a story that kind of goes back when I was really young. And I kind of tell people it's my first memory because it's about as far as I can remember back. I used to turn my house into a store. I would take everything out of the cupboards and the fridge and like take all the cushions off the couch and like find pennies and quarters and stuff for like change and all that. Wow. It was whenever my brother would babysit me because he would just be upstairs playing video games. And when my parents were gone, I would kind of take advantage of building my store. And then as I grew up, I turned like my room into like a library that people could rent books or toys. I sold Pokemon cards with friends, made YouTube channels with friends. We had lemonade stands, snow cone stands. My dad actually introduced me to flipping stuff on eBay when I was in like 5th grade. So wow. My friend and I collected a lot of, it was like these collectible toys that like my whole neighborhood used. And instead of just playing with them all the time, we actually learned that they were very valuable if you had the whole set. So we spent the entire, probably like a year collecting the set. We flipped them. I don't know if we made a profit or not. It's the memory and the joy of the process that was a lot of fun. You kind of boost forward. In like middle school / junior high, I sold Jolly Ranchers on my bus and at school. And then you kind of get over to high school, my freshman year. And funny enough, all of that kind of went away when my parents started to not necessarily pressure me, but they knew I wanted to make a lot of money when I grew up. Uh-huh. And so they kind of started pushing me towards the, medical field, doctor style type life, just because they knew I wanted to make money and they didn't really see my entrepreneurial spirit side yet. So they were like, all right, we want to help him. Let's try and see if he likes the medical field. And honestly, I really liked the idea of it at first. I pursued a health science class my freshman year. And then I read some books. I watched some YouTube videos. I looked at colleges in Texas that offered good medical programs. And, at freshman year, I worked my butt off in school. I think I was 87th in my class out of about 800 kids, so right around that top 10% mark. And then my sophomore year, which only a couple years ago, I decided to take every AP class I could, every accelerated class I could. At that point, I had already created the lawn care business, but it was just kind of like a summer cash deal. I had a couple of lawns with my friend, and we just made some cash to have fun in the summer and buy food and pay people some gas money, like our older friends. And sophomore year, I took another health class. We watched a live surgery, and I just didn't like it. I don't think I could sit still that long. I don't know. It just kind of grossed me out in a way as well. And the second I saw that, I wish there was like a chart. You could see all my A's drop to C's.
Wow.
All my C's were real low. And I failed all my finals that semester.
Wow.
I was never more confident in the fact that I wanted to become an entrepreneur. And at the time, I actually had a pretty large ego because I walked home and I told my mom, I said, Mom, if at the end of senior year I don't own a Lamborghini and a pair of Yeezys, I won't go to college. And of course, they called me out on that because it's definitely a bold statement.
Right.
And I'll always remember saying that just because of how much growth comes from that statement. What came up in that conversation was not going to college. That was kind of the main part. And there's this quote from Gary Vaynerchuk where he says that, would you rather argue with your parents for 2 to 3 years or resent them for the rest of yours and their lives? And when I saw that quote and watched that video, I was like, all right, I'm going to push as hard as I can for the next couple of years on the fact that I don't want to attend college. That way I can have a loving relationship with my family for the rest of our lives.
Absolutely.
And it took a lot of convincing and arguing in different kind of senses, just because, they want the best for me. And they all went to college, especially my mom. She put herself through college and high school with my older brother. So she definitely struggled to get to a point to prove to me that college does create a life out of the poverty she grew up in.
Right.
The life she created for me and my siblings that we're very fortunate for and grateful for. And, my mom's pretty much my best friend. Wow. And so it took a lot of talking. And finally, the lawn care business, my sophomore year, towards the end, kind of took a crazy turn because we're sophomores with a business that made $22,000.
Wow.
And I had 3 business partners at the time. There were 4 of us. We kind of looked at each other and we're like, all right, we definitely have something special here. Next mowing season, we're going to hit it hard.
Sure.
So junior year rolls around and I'm a kid, I'm young, but junior year definitely was kind of like my adversity style type year.
Gotcha. Like
a make or break. And so mowing season 2 ended because it started in sophomore year, ended at the beginning of junior year. And so there's a period of time where we can't mow because the grass goes dormant. It doesn't grow. It dies for a little bit. And so during that time is cross country season. And, some people might laugh at this, but, everyone kind of has their high school girlfriend. And the way that my mind is kind of mature, I kind of saw it more as her and I were going to build crazy businesses together. We motivated each other. And then randomly, I got kind of sidelined into a toxic relationship that lost me, friends. I just couldn't focus on anything. My cross-country times were slower than ever. Finally, I found out I was being cheated on. And I know it's high school, but it was still a really rough time.
Sure.
I kind of just put everything away except for cross-country. I just worked on my speed. It's kind of all I had at the time, just work on my speed. And then I found this category in Barnes & Noble for books called Self-Help.
Right.
And I just got addicted. There's this book called How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie from the 1920s, and it's been remastered. And I read that book, and it was all about helping people in a sense that, you don't want to impress people and be the very best to get people to appreciate you. You want to welcome them. You want to make them feel appreciative. You want to smile at them. You want to use their name. You want to always thank them, always appreciate them. And after I read that book, it just kind of spiraled upwards on how am I going to change the business for lawn care. So then I put all my efforts into that. With a couple more high school style drama things going on, our business season 3, we would wake up at 6 a.m., go to cross country practice. We'd go to school, get home from school at 4:30, and then we would mow till 9 p.m. and sometimes have to mow people's lawns with flashlights in the pitch black. But, we got our lawns done. And all the way through season 3 of lawn care, heading into our senior year, we summed up $85,000 in revenue.
Wow.
And through that, in all types of businesses, all stuff like that, especially at such a young age when people are making decisions, we had to kind of get rid of 2 of the partners. And then we formed a real LLC between me and my business partner, Evan Ballard.
Okay.
He pours his heart and soul into the business just as I do. We work as hard as we can. And senior year rolls around, season 3 ends, and we get into season 4 of mowing, which we are currently in right now. And we start to get so busy that I have to start skipping school almost every day. And
wow,
we didn't know what to do. And randomly, I guess not randomly, but it kind of feels randomly, COVID hit and school gets canceled during spring break. And as much as I feel really bad for my peers and stuff that we didn't get our senior prom, we don't get a proper graduation, we didn't get our senior week, from a different style of perspective, COVID made it possible for my business to survive in a sense where a lot of businesses failed. While our business was very much struggling, it gave us the chance to not have to be at school and do our online classes at night while we could mow during the day. And so far this year, it is June 3rd today, and we've almost made the same amount that we made in the whole entirety of last season, and we're still growing immensely and crazily. And I focus so much on lawn care. I know I mentioned I had a clothing business earlier. That was a little thing I did in sophomore year that kind of grew into something I didn't enjoy, so I kind of put it to the side.
Sure.
But, with lawn care, I get up at about 5:30 every morning. My team members showed up at my house around 6. We drive to our storage facility. We load up, try and get to the first house at 7. I think they all clocked out at about 3 p.m. today. So that's kind of the style right now. We're just all out there grinding and mowing lawns as much as we can.
So, yeah, I mean, you covered a lot of material, a lot of ground there. There was something you said that made the perfect pivot, really honestly, into what I wanted to talk about today. But you also brought up other things that created more questions in me. So let me ask you this. First of all, did you tell everyone how old you were at the beginning? Because I felt like I was saying young entrepreneur and, making sure I was putting young in the correct context. But I don't know that I or you even said how old you actually are.
Yeah, I don't think so, but I'm 18 years old. I guess technically tomorrow I'm 18 and a half because I like to count things like that.
Gotcha.
2020 senior. I graduated a couple weeks ago. Best day of my life. I never felt more weight off my shoulders. I'm not a school person or anything like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm 18. That's my age.
So I just want to put everything in context to what you're saying, right? Of course, people are hearing that you were in high school while pursuing certain things, like you said, the clothing and the lawn care. I wanted to make sure that people knew the age of the person that's talking today, to also solidify what I was saying earlier. It's not to say that you have not had to learn lessons just as anybody else, but again, for your age, for where you are in life, a lot of the decision making, a lot of the choices, even when you're talking about Gary Vaynerchuk, allowing him to be a voice, that you had enough wisdom to figure out what voices are correct and things like that. Again, these are all marks of maturity that, you're only solidifying by telling everyone your age. And so that's the reason why I wanted to make sure that everyone knew. And so again, even the decisions that you're making for yourself at an early age that have to do with the long run. And this is not to inflate your story in any way or anything like that, but this is just truth of the matter. And this is also for you to not take yourself for granted, honestly, and, maybe not even play into a lot of things that could happen to a person your age, which is, getting into the comparison game of there was somebody that's younger that did this much and all this stuff. I'm telling you that there's a great deal of people, and from listening to Gary Vaynerchuk too, who have waited a very long time to sort of get into a flow of life and to begin to test things out to see what would be best fitting for them and to make the choices to ultimately be happy and contribute to the world in the best way they can. They've waited a very long time to do that. And so that in and of itself was a mark of maturity for me. And this is why I was saying that earlier. So let me say, what do you ascribe your work ethic to? So you were talking about getting up at 5:30. Man, I have so many questions for you. I should have had a pen and paper beside me, but I'll know next
That's all
time.
right.
But where do you think that comes from? I know you were talking about how your mother had to take care of your older brother and also put herself through school. And so you see her being able to push through certain things in order to make sure that she did for herself what she felt like she needed to do, which is also a mark of resilience and I would say work ethic too, to a certain degree. I would, outside of your story, assume that you got some of that from her, but what would you ascribe your work ethic to?
Yeah, so I kind of put my work ethic into, like, I guess, two different categories. One is completely correct on what you've been saying. My parents, just everything that they've taught me is, I feel like, a lot different than what a lot of other parents do. My parents, I guess, necessarily never really had rules. They just expected us to do what was right. And giving us that responsibility, we were able to honestly learn things on our own. And that taught us what's good, what's not good. And it kind of, I feel like, built my work ethic in a sense that a lot of people say work ethic can't be taught, but I think my parents figured out how to teach it because, I mean, my siblings worked very hard. My sister is a very fast track runner. My older brother works on cars all the time, and he's about as good as a professional skateboarder when he skates.
Wow.
And then my two very little siblings, who are very young, 4 and 6, I believe, just I can see it in them. They like to do things on their own. They like to, speed things up, like walk, even though they're very young, like back a couple of years ago, just stuff like that. Because I definitely dedicate that to my parents. And the other area that my work ethic comes from that I definitely think is a little bit stronger is in cross country. I'll use this as an example because it was definitely a big part of my life for the past 4 years. One of the quotes that really hit me from my old coach, he said that not everybody gets to run like you guys do. And honestly, a lot of people brush that quote off their shoulders. But like he said that not a lot of people get to run. Whereas when people show up to cross country practice, they sigh and grunt that they have to run.
Absolutely.
I would show up and be grateful that I get to run that day. And I'll go off on a little bump here. On Monday, I ran a marathon. And it was kind of completely random. My friend hit me up and he said he wanted my help to get him his first 26.2, which is the marathon distance.
Right.
And he did awesome and helped him through it. And the only thing that pushed me through, because I'm pretty sure at this point I have the worst burns on my shoulder from the sun that I ever have, because it was like 95 degrees that day. I can barely walk on my right foot. And to be honest with you, I put it in my little description on this running app I use. The only thing that pushed me through probably the last 10 miles was the fact that there's people out there that don't get to run, And
Wow.
My work ethic comes from the fact that some people are sidelined and it's not their choice. Like some people, are paralyzed by a drunk driver and they could have been like a professional runner and they don't get to run anymore.
Sure.
Or, some people get their lives taken away from them and it's not their choice and they don't even get to breathe anymore. So why should I complain about breathing hard while I'm running? Because I get to breathe. So I kind of have just like a pretty base point work ethic on the fact that I get the opportunity to work hard. Some people don't get that opportunity, and I'm not going to complain that I have it. Sure, I get stressed out while we're mowing because it's hot hour, like I'm getting tired, but at the end of the day I get home and before I go to bed, I'm just grateful that, I get that opportunity.
Absolutely. I think that's a wonderful perspective, another mark of maturity in my mind. And that is a very good driving force, I would say, is gratitude. And it's a much more healthy driving force than sometimes what people use concerning having chips on their shoulders and things like that. And so, again, just becomes another mark of maturity for me to be able to draw from that well of gratitude, which often serves you a lot longer and a lot better. And I know, Gary Vaynerchuk is big on gratitude and understanding how blessed everyone is to be a human. And so, again, to be able to pick that up wisely and understand that it's one of the probably the greatest driving force you can have towards humility and work ethic. Like you're saying, it becomes a well that kind of pushes you in a lot of different ways. Cool. I have one other question, and then I'm going to get to the main topic. You were talking earlier about how you started the whole clothing line thing. You talked about selling and flipping things on eBay. You talked about a few different things that you've tried. the lawn care business seems to be something that's really sticking for you. And from my vantage point, it seems like life is even bending in a certain way to accommodate that for you. So, with that being the case, what's your marker to really decide what's for you? Is it an internal thing? Like, how do you know when you found what it is you feel like you're supposed to be doing? You know, what is your personal marker for things like that?
Writer, producer, artist, coach, and inspirational motivational speaker, Brian Farr takes us on a deep, retrospective, and introspective journey ranging from his childhood until life today that invokes the question, will I live a life of significance or one of safety? Filled with experience-gained wisdom and revelatory insights, A New Home dares its readers to ask themselves the hard questions concerning their need to fit in. How far will you go? And will all the efforts you've made be worth it in the end? This perspective-shifting discourse is a must-read, and through its hard-hitting yet relatable, tear-jerking, and even at points comical nature may prove to be more of a life-changing event than just a good Sunday morning read. Get your physical copy or digital copy today at Amazon.com.
Yeah, I really like the questions you asked. When you said, how do you know? I feel like I have the answer to that because I know with some things. And I'll start with this. There's actually two things where this happens. Whenever I watch a superhero movie, during the whole movie, like every 10 minutes, I'll get like goosebumps. And like I get really like excited and I feel like I'm a part of the movie. And it goes the same thing with music. And I really like rap, like any era, any style. I'm pretty much into all kinds of rap music because it all deals with working hard and a lot of messages with that.
For sure.
And I get goosebumps when I hear certain lyrics from rappers, especially rappers like I really like Lil Wayne. And there's some lyrics that I hear him say that just give me goosebumps, or just a bunch of rappers. And that's how I know I'm kind of watching or listening something that I like. It's the common themes like the goosebumps. And so there's certain like milestones that we've hit in our the lawn care business where I'll get goosebumps. Like when we bought kind of our first upgraded mowers and brought them home, I got goosebumps. Or we had a big mow day where we had like 12 employees working. They were all my friends, and I just sat and I was watching them all unload the equipment after like a hard day of work. And I like couldn't have been more proud to have all of them on payroll and like genuinely excited to pay them. I had goosebumps. Or anytime I watch a Gary Vee video, pretty much I get goosebumps, just kind of the whole helping people thing.
Absolutely.
But definitely my marker on what I know something's right is when I make like a difference, like a true difference in someone's life. Like I can post a motivational quote on my story and maybe some people will read it or brush it off. But sometimes I'll get like a message from someone and they'll say, hey, I just binge listened to like 25 of your episodes on the podcast and you inspired me to do this, like physically do something. That is when I know like what I want to do, like speaking in front of people, writing for people to read, talking into a mic and recording for people to listen to. Genuinely, that kind of is where it all falls to. That's kind of how I know is like if the goosebumps and that like the chills and that genuine, feeling of happiness and helping others is there. That's where I like to be.
Wow. And so I'm going to tell you the reason why I asked. I just finished a very good book. One of the primary points that it was making at the beginning of it that really stuck out to me, and I'm going to talk to you. Honestly, my podcasts are normally more conversation based rather than just interviewish. And I like to be in it with people, to be honest with you. Anyway, we'll talk about that later, maybe off the podcast. But so I'll tell you this. One of its main points that stuck out to me in the beginning was that, and I absolutely agree with this point. It says that what you should listen to more than anything else is your spirit, right? The spirit that every human possesses, right? Because it's the one thing in life that will never lie to you. And it's a very true statement. I will say that for me personally, I know that not everybody has the worst intentions, right? You wouldn't say that your parents, when they were saying things to you about going to school and trying to figure out the perfect route for you, that they felt like you could make the most money after they heard that was your desire. They did their best to come up with a solution that they thought would be fitting for you to make it to your end goal. So their aim was not even bad at all towards you. But that didn't mean that that was necessarily the most proper way for you to go, right? And so when it came down to it, you had to rely on something else than just good intentions from other people. And I think that's really what that book was pointing to, that you have to have an inner knowing for everything. And so I'm actually happy that you are saying that I'm looking inward, and there's certain signals, there's certain signs that come from within me or that happen to me, however, you want to describe it, that I know, but it's all it's an inward knowing. And I think that that's going to serve, honestly, every single person the most. And I don't know if you've noticed this before in life, and this is why I said it's so unique. And it's a thing that you should not take for granted, that you're already listening to your voice at this stage in life. And kudos to people like Gary Vaynerchuk who are encouraging people to that level of freedom. Because what happens is, and I normally use this example, and I don't know if you have this example, I came up in a very poverty atmosphere, right? And what happens is when you only have a certain food of choice, not just because you can only afford a specific type of food, but normally when you are stuck in poverty as a person, you also have a poverty mindset, right? And so you're actually limited in your mind, and maybe you could afford a different selection of food. Maybe you could afford to do something different, but there's blockages in your mind that are going to keep you trapped in the same cycles of poverty, right? And so you feel like these are the only things that you can afford. These are the only things that are available to you as a person. And so you're not really fighting your way out. You're just being trapped by these same cycles. And so what happens is when you grow up in those type of environments, there are things that you are brought up on. Again, nobody's intending to hurt you, but it's not the best thing for you. And I'm using physical food for an example for a reason, right? And so when you eat it, sometimes your stomach hurts, right? And because it's not the best thing for you, it's just like really processed foods or whatever, it might just not agree with you as a person. You may be allergic to it. But because of the poverty conditions, all the people that are trying to do the best for you know to tell you to do is to sleep it off. You know what I mean? See, but your body was given certain techniques and abilities and graces that allow you to know when something's wrong for you, even your physical body. All right. And so here's what I'm saying. Oftentimes when you're growing up in an environment in which a lot of people are doing the same thing, even though these things are hurting you, people learn to ignore it over time, right? And so I'll keep eating the same thing because I feel like this is what I have to eat. This is the only thing that my parents are giving to me. And so I begin to ignore those things on a physical level, like the signs, like I said, the stomach aches and things like that. And I just kind of get used to the pain. And rather than making a change, rather than making a choice to do something different, people get stuck in cycles of things they don't like. So let's take this to a career choice. Sometimes you have the parents that, again, are just doing the best they can for you from their knowledge, from their ability. And what they're doing is telling you, well, I think you should go this route, right? And this career path. And you listen to them and you kind of get into the career path, but it doesn't sit well with you, right? Internally. But if you are content with ignoring that, you'll just get into cycles of just, let's say, just going to work every day, going to 9 to 5s, whatever the situation is. And you'll feel the pain, but you continue to ignore it because you think that's the only path you can take, right? What I'm saying is special is that if you can get to the point, especially as early as Ayden has, if you can get to the point to where you do not ignore those signals, the ones that are telling you this is not right for you, this is wrong for you, and then pay attention to those things that start to tell you this is right for you, again, your life can end up in a much better predicament, to a much better place, and a place of fulfillment ultimately, or a place of happiness, which is ultimately where we all want to be.
I was just going to say the whole thing that you're saying with the spirits and all that, I call it like the gut feeling almost.
Sure.
It's like always trust your gut. And that's something I definitely live by and have been for the past couple of years.
Absolutely. And like I said, however you describe it is great. I just know that, again, it's an inward knowing.
Yes.
And so I just wanted to point that out. And also, again, another thing that should not be taken for granted, I think, from you is the fact that that's something that's already implanted in you at this point. And once you taste freedom, once you taste fulfillment that comes from being able to follow your gut instinct, as you would say, there's really no turning back. And so my encouragement, of course, to you and everybody else that's listening is to pay attention to that small factor that could have been skipped over because it was just a small piece of what you said, but it's so important that you were going with your gut instinct the entire time. And I just think that's a very important factor to get you to ultimate happiness, to fulfillment, things like that. And again, as you were saying, ultimately it's going to lead you on a path where you're not resenting the people who are just trying to give you decent advice. You're going to actually be able to take the brunt of their disagreement at the front of it. And they might dislike you for a moment. You might dislike them or dislike the things that they're saying to you or disagree for the moment. But again, in the long run, everybody will be happy when you go with your gut instinct. And so I just wanted to point that out because it's a very important factor when it comes down to living your dream. And of course, that's what this podcast is about. And I just didn't want to skip over that. Is there anything else you want to add to that?
Yeah, I just want to say that it is a really important message. A lot of people, especially going through high school, seeing all my friends, some of them, I was actually talking to a friend today, and he was telling me that he honestly feels like he doesn't want to go to college, but if he doesn't go to college, he said that his parents are going to cut him off of everything. And I was just trying to explain to him,
Wow.
Man, I'm going to help you as much as I can. Make sure you talk to them, but do what you actually want to do and follow that gut feeling. It's just funny that you brought it up because that's kind of what I was thinking about the whole time was a situation like that. And it's just important that people, take that risk, sometimes to do what they truly want to do. I'm a huge believer in that to pretty much an extreme because I'm going to use myself as an example because I know me. When I decided not to go to college, I told myself that I'm never going to take the SAT. I'm never going to take the ACT. I'm never going to apply to a single college, and I'm never going to go tour a college. And, it's 2.5 years later, and I never did any of that. All my friends took the SAT, ACT. I just worked. My friends went and toured colleges. I, worked. And, I trust my gut and stuff like that.
Wow. Again, amazing. And it's something that should be noted. Like I said, I really couldn't move on without really hitting that point. And I'll tell you just one story about myself. With me, I think that sometimes, even in my own entrepreneurial journey, like there were times when I was trying to help people out. And let me say this, you can even trap yourself. It's possible to trap yourself in ways like maybe you're not exactly off the path that you're supposed to, but sometimes, I listened also to the fact that you said that at a certain point you had to let go of 2 of your partners and things like that. Those hard decisions, again, being able to go with your gut instinct in those times and not just be so willing to help others at the detriment of your own dream sometimes becomes a factor that also needs to be picked up on. I will use this example that at times, so I've been correct by going about entrepreneurial journeys, but sometimes I've been so willing to try to drag people along with me that it almost contaminated certain things that I was supposed to do. And trying to drag people along just made me compromise to a level that also ended up making me unhappy in the past, right? And so it's important that at the end of the day that we continue to go about things and even make those hard decisions. I'll say that too. The ones that can seem even good in nature and still can throw you off from ultimate happiness and fulfillment. Again, and I say this all the time, when you're doing the best and the most that you can for yourself, it is going to end up being the best and most you can do for everybody else. When you're treating yourself with love, when you're listening to yourself, like those things begin to flow out to other people. And so sometimes the best way you can help others is to first help yourself in a way, or the best way you learn to love others is to love yourself, right? And so it's the same river that flows from you to other people. And maybe I'm saying it in a way that sounds more mystical or whatever, but ultimately it's just a principle to say that, again, when you're concerned about your ultimate happiness and fulfillment, primarily, trust me, that's going to overflow into caring about other people's happiness and fulfillment ultimately. And so that's just, again, good factors. One thing that I noticed from my journey was, and this is how I would know in particular, Ayden, it just wouldn't feel like it was flowing for me. Right. And so there's this thing to where there's a flow that really happens with life when you get into the direction that you're supposed to go. When you're meant to go in a certain direction, life kind of lifts you almost like a wave of life. Right. It seems like it's less effort, right, for you to do the things that you're supposed to do. You know, when you hear people like Steve Harvey talking about your gifts and things like that, I love the way that he says it. He says that your gift is what you do the absolute best with the least amount of effort. So what needs to be focused on out of that statement is that it takes the least amount of effort, but you do it the absolute best. And so when there's a flow that comes along with it, that's what I call it. When there's a flow that comes along with it, you know that's your lane. And, you know, that's just my perspective, even to add to. Aydens that hopefully helps some of you out there. All right, so getting to my last question. So the first thing I thought about when I was wanting to do this podcast with you was I think I saw a statement on your Instagram in which you were saying something to the degree of, and I'm just paraphrasing, that, it takes a long time to make money, or there's a long journey ahead, or I think you were saying it just takes a long time to be successful or something like that, right? And maybe you can
Yeah.
even let me know what it was specifically that you said. But again, that became the first marker for me to let me know that your mindset was in a good place, especially for an entrepreneurial journey, especially for a person that I'm assuming dreams big, right? You don't come across as a person that's just saying, I want to help just one person and be done with it. It seems like you want to help, a lot of people, right? And so that's one of the things you said, that it takes a long time to be successful. Again, you can tell me how you said it. And I heard you earlier say that that wasn't always your mindset, because you were telling your parents at one time that you're going to have the Lamborghini and whatever goal that was at a specific time, right? And so you're saying it was a bit of an egotistical thing at one point for you, because, and it was just being overly confident about, which is, it's okay to be confident, right? I'll never take that away from anybody. At the same time, I'm interested to know where the realism came into it and kind of what gave you that mentality. Again, I think this is one of the most important factors that a person who is a young entrepreneur, again, not using young in a derogatory way, but you literally have a lot of life ahead of you. So as a young entrepreneur, I think it's one of the biggest lessons that you can pick up. I want to know where you got it from, what changed your mind from maybe the more egotistical view in which I was going to have the 30 million by 20 or whatever, which I'm not going to say is impossible. And I never put limits or doubts upon anybody. I'm just saying, what changed your mind for you to start thinking in the long run and being prepared to fight for the long run?
Yeah. So I'm guessing maybe the post you saw was something about being patient. And relating back to Gary Vee once again, in one of his videos said the word patience, and he explained why it's one of the most important words out there. And I really got into that word because, my mom, she really likes that word too, and we kind of used it a lot the past couple of years because there's been a lot of moments where things were tough, but we knew that there was a timeline on them for it to get better, kind of like high school. Or she went through a couple surgeries in the past couple of years, and she would always just tell me, hey, eventually I'm going to be okay through patience, so you will too. And there's also this quote she used to tell me. It is, anyone can do anything for a finite period of time. And it kind of relates to the fact that if I can get through this school day, I can get to the next school day. And my biggest struggle was always school, And so I would spread the value of the word patience to other people at the same time as I would spread it to myself, and the fact that I had to be patient every single day to get through high school, to get to the point where a year ago I couldn't wait to be the person who I am now. But I knew I had to wait 365 days and be patient through that and use my time wisely.
Right.
I'm also the kind of person that looks up to a lot of people. Like when you were asking the question, I kind of already started thinking about this, where did that come from? And there's two names that really popped in my head. It was Warren Buffett and LeBron James. And the reason that LeBron James pops in my head is because, some people may disagree, but he might be having one of the better seasons of his career. And I'm not too sure how old he is, but I think he's in his upper 30s. And that's kind of towards the point where NBA players start to fall off and retire. And he's working on getting more rings. And I know he wants to play with his son in the NBA. And he had to be ultra patient to get to that point, And to the fact that he's still working as hard as he can and he's at his best still kind of shows me that I have to wait to get to that point. And then there's Warren Buffett, a really big investor in the stock market. And he owns Nebraska Furniture Mart, stuff like that. And he always says that with stocks, because I really enjoy investing. It's something we didn't really talk about, but I love investing pretty much almost all the money that I make into the stock market. And he always says that you can't get rich right away. You have to put it into companies that, one, that you enjoy, companies that you actually consume their products, and two, companies that will sustain for the next 50 years, and to not pull your money out of your account, until it's really been a long time. And so I put that into my investing strategy. I put that into real life.
Sure.
I try and teach all my friends. Like in cross country, if you're injured, there's a period of time where you can't even compete or practice for competing. So you're falling behind in 2 spots, and you have to be patient because I had like tendonitis in my knee once. If I was going to go run on my tendonitis, I was just going to screw it up and have to sit out for the rest of the season. So if you're just patient enough, eventually it'll be a lot better than if you weren't patient, I guess, is kind of the message I'm going for there.
Absolutely. So you would say that, I can't remember exactly how it's stated, and I don't want to misquote it by not saying it verbatim, but essentially it's saying that you're a smart person, if you're willing to go out and get the knowledge yourself and kind of hit all the brick walls that you need to in order to gain knowledge. But you're a wise person when you can learn from other people's mistakes, essentially, right? Or learn from other people's lessons. And so what I'm getting from you is that you were able to, by some process of osmosis or something like that, basically take on chosen mentors' attitudes towards success, and you were able to see through their lives that it's taken them a while to get where they are, and not to think that this is an overnight thing.
Yeah, 100%. The list of people that I look up to probably goes on endlessly in so many different categories and just so many different types of career paths or lives. And I just try and learn different things from different people and that relate to me. Like, something you said earlier, you said that during your entrepreneur journey, you tried to bring people along with you, and that in some way like slowed your process down or ended up hurting you overall. And I've done the exact same thing, trying to bring certain people into the entrepreneur world, and they just kind of didn't make the feeling right or do it right, and that slowed me down. And it's just a learning process, and I like that I could relate to that point that you gave there, because now I know that it's a mistake that I'm glad I made, because if you made that mistake and you learn from it, I can make that mistake and I can learn from it too.
1,000%. And not to get off subject, but the greater point that came out of it for me specifically was not to compromise on behalf of helping somebody else. And sometimes that can be the case. It's almost like I told my mother one day that, she was talking to me and she was using the word humility. And I don't like the way a lot of people use the word humility. Some people actually think humility is thinking less of yourself, as if it's synonymous with low self-esteem. And I think that's an absolute lie. Some people think that it's not thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less. And I think that's absolutely not the correct perspective either, because I highly believe in self-awareness, right? I think I have to check in with myself and make sure I am able to sleep because of my continual progress and work to have peace within myself with all of my decisions, whether that be on a moral level or just, again, making sure I'm fulfilled. And so I wouldn't even say, I think that you have to have a higher self-awareness if you really want to be successful in life than a lot of people have chosen to have. A lot of people are scared to face themselves, and they would call themselves humble because they think of themselves less. So I think that's also a bad perspective of humility. And so she was talking to me and she was using the word humility. And I told her that, this is my belief. In order to be successful, right, you have to have enough grounding to know that you're not better than anybody on this planet. This is how you come up, like you said, with a lot of mentors. This is how you gain a lot of wisdom through other people's stories, right? That's absolutely a good thing. That means you're grounded enough to be able to learn from anybody. I tell people all the time, I can learn from a child tomorrow, right? You have to be grounded enough to learn from anybody. And I mean like a literal child, 5 years old, whatever the situation is. My ear is always open to the wisdom that might come from the least likely spaces, right? And places. And so you have to be grounded enough to know that you're not better than anyone so that you can continue to learn from anyone. But at the same time, in order to be successful, you have to be okay with being better off than other people. And that's a hard lesson for other people to realize. Steve Harvey has this funny statement where he says that his dad, I think it was, told him that the best thing you can do for poor people is to not be one of them. And it sounds funny on the surface, but it positions you in two ways. First of all, if you aren't one of them, you are in a position to help them, right? Two, well, I'll just harp on that number one. It just establishes you in a way in which you can help other people. I don't have the ability to really help people out of where I have not gotten myself out of, right? And so the second reality to that is that you have to be okay with getting out first. without the other people, right? And that actually is what positions you to be able to help the rest of the people. And so I can't be a humanitarian. I can't be a person who really reaches back to help people, to aid people, until I first, it's almost the idea of when you're on the plane and the plane's going down, they always tell you to put your mask on first. The idea is that I'm no good for anybody else until I get myself to a certain place. And so what I've realized is in my efforts to help other people, it's often caused me to compromise myself to where I couldn't even get myself out. So going back to what my mother was saying, I was almost telling her, the way that you're using the word humility is as if you don't have it in you to do better than the people around you. And there's no way for you to succeed that way. You have to be okay with doing better than and not feeling better than, right? You have to have the wisdom to know that you're not better than anyone around you, but that if you make wise choices, make wise decisions, do things the right way, that you will end up in many cases being better off. And you have to be okay with that, because if you're not okay with being better off, you'll never be in a position to be able to help people who may be behind you. All right. And so for whatever reason, I just threw all of it out there. But going back to the subject at hand, so I think you're absolutely right. The journey is a longer one than we expect. And I want to add just one perspective, and you can chime on this and then we're done. What I want to also add to the conversation is that, truthfully, I know that it's okay to have goals. It helps you to have markers for success. It helps you to honestly just, kind of add a certain time element, especially if you're the type of person that likes to procrastinate and things like that. If you set goals, it helps you keep up with yourself, that you don't let life kind of get away from you and, you're not doing anything towards where you ultimately want to be. So you set a goal so that it can press you to do things in a timely fashion to where you're not wasting life. I understand all of those things. At the same time, I want to say this, that what should be pointed out about the whole factor of going about your journey for the long haul is that this is why it's important to have in mind and have in hand something you love, right? Doing what you love becomes so important now, because honestly, if you didn't set any goals and you just did what you love, you would find yourself reaching goals that you probably didn't even imagine, right? If you get into what you're gifted to do, again, going back to what best suits you, what you internally know is the right thing for you, right? That's how you come across your best giftings to the world. When you get into those spaces and life is flowing with you in that type of way, because you're operating in who you're meant to be, or you're operating in what you're supposed to do in your purpose, if I can say it that way. And life, honestly, the accolades or whatever comes with you being a decent human for making the choices to get in your purpose and serve humanity from that vantage point, the goals are going to come without you even focusing on them. And so sometimes I feel like it's okay for us to just get into what we love. Even the way I'm saying it, it just reminds me of the singer that was just singing in bars for years and years, and they worked on their craft, and all of a sudden one day they're in the subway. This was a real story. I don't remember any names, but this is a real story. One day she's in the subway and a random YouTuber comes up to her. He's just asking random people to sing, and she sings for the guy and she shocks him, right? And literally she blows up on YouTube, and her life changed in an instant. But it was because she just kept doing what she loved. It's another guy who was in the subway singing for a long time and ended up on a really big DJ producer's album recently, right? But he did it, I think he was doing it for like 50 years, right? And I don't know that he ever imagined that that would be the way that he got in front of the world. But these things happen not because they were focused on so many goals, but because they were doing what they loved. They were going to do that for the long run regardless, right? And what focusing on what you love does is you're going to get better at it the more you do anything. This is just principles of success, right? In any type of area. The more you do something, you're going to get better and better at it. And so that's why they say practice makes perfect. And so when you're doing something you love, you're going to get better and better at it. And before you know it, you will have achieved a level of skill, and especially, again, when you're working in your gifting, not just doing random stuff. I'm really big on this. I know I was talking to you about this on your podcast. I'm really big on you doing what you're supposed to do, not just random things that you think are popular or just, following some trends or something like that don't last long. But when you're doing what you're supposed to do, it really makes for a person who is able to reach heights in their profession and their skills that, again, are above a lot of other people. And the next thing you know, you're going to end up reaching a lot of goals that a lot of people don't, because you were able to capitalize on your gift. And so here's the last example. Even Lil Wayne, because you brought him up earlier, he was talking about recently how he was just a rapper. Honestly, I don't know that he had all of this stuff that's happened to him in mind, but he just loved the quote unquote game, right? He loved his gift. He loved to rap, so much so that he never put out a mixtape that he charged for or anything like that. But see, the money started coming. It started following him because he was doing what he loved. And because he loved it, he was able to get ridiculously good at it. And because he was able to get ridiculously good at it, he became a commodity that people were willing to pay a lot of money for. You understand what I'm saying? So the cycle helped him to meet goals that I don't even know if they were in his mind, but it was on the track of him just doing what he loved. And I think no matter what, he's going to do what he loves for the long haul regardless. And so here's my point to you. And here's what I'm adding to this piece of the conversation. I think sometimes when we're focused on, again, what it is we love, it automatically gives you a running in the long run, because, again, when you love it, you just do it naturally, right? You're just going to continue to do it, and you're going to continue to do it. Nothing wrong with goals, again, but when you position yourself with purpose, maybe that's a fancy way of saying it, right? That's already going to give you a long distance run in anything, because you're going to have the power to do it out of the love you have for it, right? And so I just think that's a big key in making sure that we're able to do what we want to do for the long run, right? I also feel like that helps point to ultimate fulfillment and things like that. Is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah. So kind of something you said a little bit ago that I actually agree with like 100%. All of it was, you kept mentioning like the long run. And another thing I like to think about with running, I'm a runner. I really like to run. You know, it's a great way to get some steam off or just kind of go out and experience nature for a little bit. But I think about it like whenever I would sprint in track, whether it's the 800, 400 or the mile or the 200, it's very like, it's not fun almost. Like all your muscles are pushing as hard as they can. Your lungs are pushing as hard as they can. But when you go for 10, 12, 8, 26.2 mile runs, you get to just almost turn your brain off. And I'm talking from experience, but I truly get to experience something that I really love doing. And that's just experiencing it long term. Whereas when you're sprinting, it's very short, it's very painful. And when you finish, you just kind of fall over and you don't even think of it. You're just kind of done almost. And I really like how you just kept mentioning like the long run. It reminded me of that thing where I appreciate distance running a lot more than just sprinting.
Absolutely. And there's so much, honestly, I would want to continue to add to this conversation. I know I can't keep you all night. Obviously, I love to do this, to be honest with you, because like I told Ayden so many times, like, oh, this shouldn't take long. And this is like an hour and a half probably of material already. So sorry for keeping you so long, but I have enjoyed it. Is there anything else you want to add to, especially young entrepreneurs? This is a lot of helpful information. I hope everyone got something out of it, again, young or old. Ayden, is there anything else that you would want to add to, actually just anything? Is there anything else you want to add that could help anyone anywhere?
Something that I've honestly been pretty eager to get at and have been kind of waiting to talk about it is, normally, I think this is probably my second time ever being interviewed or third time. And usually at the end, I just kind of shout out all my stuff. But the only thing that I want people to do is, over on my Instagram, I'm not going to go too into detail because I know it's sensitive topics, but there's a lot going on in the world right now, especially in my like kind of home state, kind of where it all began. And a lot of my friends are over there, a part of it, and I'm just trying to support everything over there. But in my Instagram, I have a link in my bio where people can go help, like sign petitions, donate money. My Instagram is Ayden.Reddington. If anyone wants to help, you know, the city of Minneapolis or pretty much any city where events are going down and a lot of stuff is happening, there's a link in my bio, and actually a lot of people's bios if you go around and check. And normally I would just shout out all my other stuff, but there's another time and place for that. I really just want to bring as much support and help back to the city of Minneapolis, or pretty much, you know, cities all around the United States as well as the world. Just bring a little awareness to that. And So that's pretty much what I got left. But if anyone's wanting to support, again, it's at Ayden.Reddington, AYDEN.REDDINGTON. I don't need anyone to follow, like, or comment on my stuff. There's literally just a link to a website where there's endless places to help, especially from home too. So that's what I got, Brian. I really appreciate the time and having me on the show. I had a lot of fun. I actually gained a lot of value from this, and we'll have to do it again sometime.
Absolutely. In light of a lot of things that are happening, I was going to honor you publicly. I was going to wait to the end. But, as a black male, which you already know, kind of coming up through things, I dedicated 2 podcasts to it. The last 2 podcasts I've done, I've dedicated to the subject matter that happened around George Floyd. And obviously, like you said, it's subject matter that needs to be honestly hit right on the head. Everybody's not willing to do that. And so what I was going to honor you for doing is honestly just speaking out on it. I don't even remember exactly how I got on your page to kind of see that you had mentioned the events and things like that. And really your way of showing what I felt was disgust for injustice and things like that. And so, like you said, without getting into it, I know that's not what I called you in here for. I'm not going to make it about that now, but I do want to honor you for lifting your voice to say something. Again, that just says more to me about your character. And I do want to say that, even as far as you saying, we have to do it again, I think one level of commitment I'm willing to make is that I don't know what your main goals are. I don't have any like real insight in what you're gonna end up being, I don't know. You know what I'm saying? And I don't care about any of that. You understand what I'm saying? So I've already made a commitment in some type of way. I don't care if it's once every 2 years or something like that, to stay committed to kind of being around you. And I'm saying this publicly just so you know how serious I am about it. And yeah, so I honestly really appreciate you saying that. Again, I hope somebody got value out of this conversation, and there'll be a lot more to come. He won't tell you to follow him, but I will. Go ahead and follow him and hit him up and let him know what a help he's been to you through this podcast. I appreciate your time, man, and your efforts. And I see what you're doing already, and you're listening to some wise people. And I appreciate your honesty and just things like that already. Again, genuine soul. Yeah, I just appreciate you, man. And, we'll talk. But again, I pray that everyone's way be made prosperous. And until next time.